Hey everybody, Tim Stafford and Mike Erre here coming at you. Welcome to the Vox Podcast. Thank you for tuning in. We're so grateful to play a small part in your day. And fall is in the air. An election is happening. This will air on Monday. Election is happening tomorrow. And holy moly, Tim, it seems... I mean, I don't know if you know this, but it seems like politics has kind of become center stage right now. I don't know. Do you feel the same way?
I feel like it's been that for a couple months at least, or maybe the last couple of years.
Yeah, I was trying to be sarcastic there. Like,
oh,
yeah.
I was just coming alongside you sarcastically.
Oh, nice. Yes. Yeah, it does. It does, Mike. It does seem like politics has become an issue. So we wanted to take just the last couple of episodes right before the election. So we talked to Caitlin last episode. She's a rock star, and what a fun conversation about the ways in which we're formed politically, even in ways we're not aware of. And then today we wanted to touch on the very non-controversial topic of abortion.
Ooh.
And right. And so what the world needs is more men talking about abortion. And so we're here to offer more.
And because of that, we went and recruited another man.
Yes. Yeah. We invited Skye to come and join us. And our friend Skye from the Holy Post is going to be our guest today. He, along with Phil Vischer, produced another one of their videos. And this was on the abortion, the topic of abortion as it pertains to one-issue voting. Yeah. And so we thought, I mean, certainly this is controversial, so there are a whole bunch of disclaimers coming. But we thought it would be appropriate to air this topic right before the election, because I think for a lot of people, at least a lot of people that I'm aware of, the abortion topic is the singular focus of their presidential vote.
Yes.
And so they're willing to overlook President Trump's behavior or character or whatever because he has been appointing pro-life justices. And likewise, even if there were an attractive Democratic candidate, they would never consider voting for a candidate because of the Democratic Party platform considering abortion. And even when I've dipped my toe in the Facebook waters, we had an anti-racist. It was just Christians shouldn't be shy about denouncing white supremacy, right? I mean, it seems like we should be leading that conversation. And literally the first comment on the post was about abortion.
Yeah.
And so what Skye put together on this video and what we're going to explore is the argument that the most pro-life thing you can do is to vote for a Republican president who will appoint Supreme Court justices whose goal it is to overturn Roe v. Wade.
Right.
And Skye argues that the data and the facts do not bear that argument out. So a couple of things here at the start. Number one, we have talked with Bonnie and others about the abortion issue as an issue.
Yeah, many episodes on this topic.
Yes, many episodes on this topic. And so this is not what we want to make clear is that this isn't an argument advocating for a pro-life over pro-choice position. This is an argument made by pro-life people about how their vote gets determined by one singular issue. And Skye is raising the question that if you're pro-life, there may be more effective ways of voting pro-life than the presidential election.
Yeah, I think the initial response is always like, you're telling me to be pro-choice. You're telling me that and that's not what that's not the point of it at all. It's just he's trying to give content to the conversation, not saying like, hey, you're wrong, jump over to this side of the fence.
Right.
'Cause I feel like that's a lot of time anytime you try to have a conversation about this, people initially get defensive and say, it just automatically becomes a me versus you,
right,
us versus them,
right,
and that's not the point of this.
No, it's not, and it very much argues against the position that I was told to hold, which is that you give no ground, you don't compromise. This is the most important issue that determines how you vote in a presidential election.
Yeah.
And so just to get it out there, and we've talked about this in past episodes, we are, well, I shouldn't say we, because I don't know exactly how you'd articulate this. I consider myself pro-life, from womb to tomb. And that means I'm very eclectic. So do I think at a certain point, babies have ontological status in the womb? Yes. Do I think abortion should be permitted in some cases? Yes. Would I do anything to see the amount of abortions reduced? I wouldn't do anything, but I'd love to see that. And so would a lot of my pro-choice friends. I mean, we're all, a lot of sane people are working to decrease the reasons why abortion is an attractive alternative, not just overturn the issue. But I'm also pro-woman and pro-unwed mother and pro-mom and pro-woman who had an abortion and pro-immigrant and alien and stranger and anti-war and anti-death penalty. I mean, that all to me is pro-life. Anti-euthanasia. Those are political issues that for me come out of a pro-life sort of ethic.
Yeah.
Do I think there are exceptions and can be exceptions? Well, sure. But I want you to know this. Because we're not trying to smuggle in some sort of other agenda by having Skye. What we're trying to say, for those of you who are pro-life, is voting Republican the most pro-life thing you can do, and that's what Skye is calling into question.
Right.
So that's the reason we wanted to have this conversation, because I think many of us, regardless of how you feel about the legality of the issue, would love to see circumstances change so that young women didn't feel hopeless, and people not feel alone or shamed, and that men take greater responsibility, and that the socioeconomic factors that make this attractive are dealt with.
Yes.
And so
those stats come up in this too. I think that's what's helpful. For me, it's one of those things where it's like what we talked about with Caitlin last week, is that I don't want to be formed by anything unconsciously. Like I'm in a season of challenging and seeking and collecting and analyzing, and I'm doing that through prayer too, trying to figure out what is right, what is wrong, what is Jesus looking to do, what has God been doing? Like I want to know those things. Mm-hmm. And often I think, not just with the abortion topic, but just with a lot of church topics, I have been unconsciously formed, and not all of those formations are healthy or productive. Yeah. So if you can hold some things loosely enough to find out if it really is the right version, or if it really is what God is trying to do, or if it really is what Jesus said, I feel like it gives Jesus a little bit of room to really help you become that cruciform, like to really take on and embody Jesus. I feel like that's what we've been going through with the Sermon on the Mount, is like, hey, you heard it said, but I say.
Yep. And next episode we'll be back. We'll be back there.
Round 2.
Yes, but our concern has been, what are the ethics that govern the political entity called the kingdom of God? And how it gets played out can be a matter of all sorts of disagreement, and it is, right? We're in a system that invites us for opinion, and hallelujah for that. But that all of that falls under our first allegiance. Mm-hmm. And so as you go to vote this week, realize that your ballot, that moment where you fill out a ballot, is not the most important political thing you do. the most important political thing that you do is and forgive the sort of cliched way of saying this, but you actually vote every day, right?
Yeah.
You're political every day. And do you advocate for the poor and the marginalized? Do you advocate for an ethic of life? Do you work to create situations where the double standards between men and women are eliminated? Are you voting for the inclusive and radical nature of the kingdom of God in its nonviolent form? Are you voting for compassion and forgiveness and reconciliation and not coveting and fidelity, right? That's what we're talking about. And so great, do your vote, hallelujah, but your most political act isn't that. That's, in some ways, that's the least political thing that you do.
Right.
The most political thing that you do is you choose a way of being in the world. And does that reflect the kingdom or not? That's the issue. So let's have at it. Let's pray for the process. Let's pray for safety. Let's pray that increasingly God's kingdom will come on earth as it is in heaven. And let's be agitators for good and mercy and so anyway, one quick thing before we go, and I should have mentioned this up top. But we had a couple of people join our Patreon team, so I know this is a bit of a left turn, but I have to say it because we have a Daniel and a Jeremiah who came on. So thank you for the biblical prophets,
some
right?
Old Testament guys.
Yes, we got some old T guys coming on. So Daniel and Jeremiah, thank you, and then we have a Donald, and I don't think it's the Donald. We have a Donald. And so want to thank you guys for coming on our Patreon team. As always, if you want to find out more about it, you can go to patreon.com, type in Vox Podcast with Mike Erre. We're starting to get questions about whether or not we're affiliated with Vox Media, and we are not. We are our own separate 501c3. We're going to rename the podcast here sometime in the next couple of months to avoid that confusion. But everything that you would give is tax deductible, and we're all very grateful for it. And it allows us to do stuff like this. So, ladies and gentlemen, our friend Skye, and hope it's thought-provoking, and would love to know what you think. Ladies and gentlemen, we are here with the Skye King. Skye, our friend Skye Jethani, longtime friend of the show, co-host of The Holy Post, and author, speaker, and lately creator of videos. His buddy Phil, who we had on several episodes ago, did a couple of videos on race. And then if that wasn't inflammatory enough, Skye decided to do a video on abortion, and so we've been eager to kind of get his thoughts on the video, the process, the reaction, and those sorts of things. So Skye, thank you for coming back, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you for having me back. I love talking to you guys. Love the Vox.
Love the Vox.
Happy to be here.
What does the Vox say is the question that we wrestle with very, very deeply. So one of the things, just for a bit of backdrop, Skye, and I recognize that you and I kind of share similar inklings around some of these things, but I had put something out, and again, who cares about what I write on social media? But the reaction to it was I found interesting. I just put something about, it should be pretty obvious that being anti-racist is a good thing. We should not, Christians should be the loudest cheerleaders against white supremacy. Stuff that I would imagine, is pretty consistent with Imago Dei. And in the very first comment was about abortion. So my post had nothing to do. It was about white supremacy and about whether or not Christians should loudly condemn it. The first response was abortion.
Wow.
And several, and that thread continued throughout the hundreds of comments that kind of rolled through the discussion. It had nothing to do with white supremacy. It had everything to do with abortion. And I've had that experience over the last 5, 6, 7 years as we've gone through a couple of different cycles, where any critique of the Republican candidate is automatically met with yes, but abortion. And so you had done a series of tweets on this that got turned into a video where you address literally with the words yes, but abortion. And so I'd love to start. First of all, I want to start by just acknowledging we're three dudes talking about abortion, but you're going after, and this is the distinction I want to make. We're not just talking about abortion in a vacuum. We're talking about abortion as it pertains to the way that people of our tribe prioritize their vote, right? They become single issue voters around this one issue, and any deviation from that is met with pretty significant resistance.
I will, let me narrow it even further.
Okay.
Because this came up in some of the critique of my video. From the opening sentence of the video to the last sentence of the video, the scope is clearly articulated that I am talking about voting for the presidency of the United States. Mm. I think there are cases in which abortion can be the single issue on which you vote, depending on the election and depending on the office that you are voting about. The video was all about how much effectiveness does the president actually have on this issue,
right? And
therefore, should it be the preeminent or single issue that determines who you vote for president? That was my concern.
Yes, that's
so. I don't fault Christians who think abortion is a preeminent issue. I just want to show them that it doesn't. The presidency doesn't have as much influence on this issue as you may think.
Right. So I want to really clarify.
Another way of putting it, I wrote a follow-up to this. Sorry, is when we need to not just consider the candidate and the issues, but the office that is at stake here. Mm-hmm. So I don't care what my local school board president thinks about U.S. foreign policy because they have no influence on that issue.
Right.
I do care what a president or a senator thinks about that. And so likewise, we need to care about abortion and we need to care about the offices that have the most influence on that policy. And I think it's just striking that a lot of people don't realize how little influence the presidency historically has had on actually affecting abortion. That's the issue that I'm trying to address.
Yes. And that narrowing is really important to specify because we're not sitting here as three dudes talking about abortion. We're talking about the ways in which voting decisions are made around the presidency, using this particular issue as sort of the Trump card over everything else. And so set aside whatever, for our listeners and your listeners, they're coming from all different places. Set aside whatever your particular view is. And we want to talk about that specific issue because the argument that I've been told, Skye, and that obviously you've heard as well, is that our job is to have the biblical position on a social issue and then to select the candidate that upholds that position. And in the case of the presidency, you do that because of the Supreme Court in the hope that that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. And you identify several issues with that way of thinking. So let's just start with the big one. Because you just said, does our choice of president matter ultimately as much as we think it does to the outcomes on rates of abortion?
Yeah. So first of all, let's not dismantle that argument. Let's dismantle the effectiveness of it because the argument is flawed too, but the effectiveness is another. So since Roe v. Wade was ruled in 1973, Republican pro-life presidents have appointed 12 justices to the Supreme Court. Democratic presidents have only appointed 4. And for 49 of the last 50 years, the Supreme Court has been dominated by Republicans. And the 1 year that it wasn't was last year when there was I think it's only this year since Ginsburg passed away that it's been a tie 4-4 Supreme Court between liberals and conservatives, but that's it. I mean, there's never been a year in the last 50 years where liberals have had the majority on the Supreme Court. Wow. And yet in the last 50 years, they've done nothing to overturn Roe v. Wade.
And they've had opportunity.
So just on the right, and there have been numerous opportunities. Exactly, 1992 is probably the most significant one, and in that case, it was an 8-1 majority of conservatives to liberals, and the one liberal on the court in 92 was actually a Democrat who had voted against Roe v. Wade. So there could have been a 9-0 ruling to overturn abortion, but they didn't. They reaffirmed it. So anyway, if you just look at the last 50 years of history, there's no indication whatsoever that appointing yet more conservative Republicans to the Supreme Court is actually going to overturn Roe. So I think that just on a pragmatic level, at some point you got, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. And that's essentially what a lot of voters are being forced into doing by thinking, well, now this time, it's Lucy with the football and Charlie Brown, right? This time we'll get the justice in the court who will overturn Roe. So that, I think, is a flawed argument. But then on the flip side, there is also, let's say it did happen. Let's say she actually keeps the football there and Charlie Brown actually gets to kick it. What's going to happen? And all the best evidence from both liberals and conservatives is that overturning Roe would do almost nothing to change abortion in the United States.
What would it do then?
So, well, we would go back to the pre-1973 reality of abortion, which was one in which different states had different policies. In some states it was outlawed, in other states it was very accessible. And in fact, before Roe v. Wade in 1972, there were still about 500,000 or 600,000 abortions in this country, legal abortions in this country every year. Even more interesting, today the abortion rate is lower than it was before Roe v. Wade. So simply reversing Roe wouldn't have the impact that a lot of people think it would. And I think both political parties use the Roe issue as a way of animating their voters. It's a very useful political narrative. On the right, it's we need to overturn Roe to protect the unborn. And on the left, it's we need to defend Roe to protect women and their rights. And so both parties use it to get their bases fired up, to get voters into the polls, but neither one of them are being intellectually honest. And when you start, goodness, there was just an article, I think, in it may have been Vox, not your Vox, but the news site Vox, which is a pretty liberal, progressive
for sure
news website. And because they're worried about Trump's new appointee possibly voting to overturn Roe. And they just did an article basically saying, hey, even if Roe gets overturned, it's not the end of the world because it's not going to affect abortion that much. So even liberals are admitting this when they really dig into the issue, that it's not the silver bullet that everyone makes it out to be. And yet that's what's driving so many Christians in their voting decisions. And I think they're being duped a little bit by both political parties that are using this for their political advantages rather than for real change.
So even if Roe were overturned, that just punts the decision back to the states, correct?
Yeah, and the argument of some people is, well, good, then we can fight on the state level and slowly overturn all those as well. Well, yes and no. The reality is it's already happening. Like there's been enormous progress on the state level to change laws, change policies, put things in place healthcare wise that prevents unplanned pregnancies and helps more women and families. And we have seen great progress made without having to overturn Roe. So my argument is simply, what if we took some of the money and the energy and the effort that goes into the national effort to get a Republican president and pro-life justices and overturn Roe, if you took just a portion of that energy and really redirected it to local and state efforts that are effective, we could probably drive the abortion rate down even lower. So this is not an issue of right and wrong. It's an issue of strategy and what's effective and ineffective.
Right.
And David French has written about this beautifully, and he and I have had private conversations about it as well. He says, what drives a lot of donations is the presidency. Pro-life organizations get a lot of money fighting for the presidency, and yet when you ask people to volunteer or give money to their local pregnancy crisis center, it's not there. So it's sexy and it's exciting to fight about the presidency. It's not as exciting to fund the local crisis pregnancy center or really work on the ground to change adoption policies in your state. But that's where it's really happening, and that's where effective reduction of abortions is seen. So this is just an issue of what what would be most effective at actually helping women and reducing abortions?
Right.
That's
You
my
gave a
concern
stat
here.
too. I wish I would have written it down. You did a stat. Was it Texas and Delaware? Were those the two
Right.
states? Do you remember the numbers off the top of your head because that illustrated
Yeah,
that
rough.
really well.
I could probably pull them up.
There's
too.
a video if you want to refer people to that. But yes.
Yes, there is a video. So Texas, obviously a red state, very conservative Republican state. Between 2011 and 2014, I believe they passed a number of restrictions on abortion, and the abortion rate in Texas dropped by 28%. The best estimates are that if Roe were overturned, there would be a nationwide reduction of 12%. So Texas more than doubled that without Roe having to be overturned through local efforts, right? In Delaware, a blue state, they obviously took a different approach. Rather than limiting access to abortion, they expanded access to healthcare, especially for their poorest citizens. And it reduced the abortion rate there by 37%, which is 3 times more than overturning Roe would do. So there's a lot that we can do apart from just electing a pro-life president. And I'm not against electing a pro-life president, but I think the amount of time and energy and money that goes into that is taking away energy, time, and money that could be used more effectively to actually reduce abortions at the state and local level.
Okay, so there are a couple of really big issues here. One is we do seem to be played in the sense that we're promised doing more of the same will result in the reduction of abortions, even though the science, and this is where, I think you had referenced it, or I saw it from David French's Twitter account, but it was that abortion, the rate of abortion was going down dramatically, regardless of who was president, and one of the biggest drops had been during the Obama administration, and it was because of these local efforts and community efforts, among other trends, that allow people to see that there could be other options, or to not even get into that situation to begin with. So one of the big claims that I think is very, very significant is that yes, okay, if you are pro-life and you're pro everything we can do to save the lives of these babies, then what's the most effective thing to do? And your argument is, well, the most effective thing to do isn't to spend all this time and energy on pro-life presidents and Supreme Court justices at the expense of the local efforts that seem to be developing the most fruit in terms of actually reducing the number.
So simply put, who you vote for president is less impactful on abortion than who you vote for your governor or who you vote for your local state legislature. Those races and those offices have proven to have far more influence on reducing abortions than who is sitting in the Oval Office. And I think our money and energy and effort and rhetoric should reflect that reality.
So let's say everything you're saying is true. How does that help to navigate the waters of presidential elections? In other words, one of the critiques I would have of my tribe is that we claim to be pro-life, but we mean pro-baby. And when we find out about, 500 kids that it can't be reunited with we can't find their parents, or civilians that have been bombed because of drone targets, or any number of other horrific sort of circumstances, there seems to be this wiping away of that, because as long as we're voting pro-life, anything else that happens isn't as significant as that, right? So can you speak to that kind of way of thinking a little bit? Because I think some people will go, okay, well, that's interesting, but it's still murder, Skye, and how can I vote for it even if my vote isn't effective? Isn't there something morally symbolic about casting my vote for a pro-life president? Okay, so
let's take a step back. You use this really important word, symbolic. And this is not in the video, and we didn't have time to get into this because if the video gets too long, no one will watch it. I tend to put especially Christian pro-life voters into 3 categories. One are the people who are most concerned with a solution, right? I put myself there, right? How do I vote in a way which is going to maximize a pragmatic solution to abortion that's going to help the most women, save the most kids, all those kinds of things? That's who the video was really targeting. That's who I'm trying to speak to. Then there are those Christians who primarily vote about pro-life issues. Sorry, my dog. Completely hacky. See him back here?
Yes, he's coughing up a hairball, but it's fine.
Yeah, that's Alfie. He's 15 years old.
Oh, sweet Alfie.
So there's the solution-oriented voter. Then there's the symbolic voter. And for them, it's not so much which policies or strategies or elected officials and offices are going to reduce abortion, but it's about presenting a righteous nation to God, right? We want laws on the books that conform to what God wants from us. Yeah. So this is a pretty crass way of putting it, but if given this false option of keep abortion legal, but make it, almost non-existent, or make abortion illegal, but continue at the same rate it's currently at, these people would probably choose the option of make it illegal, even though it's not actually going to reduce the number, because we will then not be guilty of endorsing something that's evil with our laws.
That's exactly the critique I read about you, Skye. Yes. The internet said mean things.
Those are the symbolic voters. There's a third category I'll get to in a second. But the problem with that approach, and I wrote about this in response, is, to put it kind of bluntly, God's not stupid. Right? You see, one of the themes you see throughout the Bible is that he doesn't give a rip about symbols if they're not backed up by genuine, heartfelt devotion, justice, love, whatever the symbol represents. So he rejects the worship of Israel because he says their lips praise me, but their hearts are far from me. Jesus critiques the Pharisees because they were very righteous in all their obedience to the law, and they had all the right customs and procedures and all that. But he said, you're whitewashed tombs. You look beautiful on the outside, but inside you're full of dead man's bones and unclean. Paul rejects the symbol of circumcision because he said it's not an outward symbol that makes you a Jew, but it's the inward posture of your heart, right? It's the one who obeys the law. So merely having a righteous law on the books that says abortion is murder, but don't actually reduce the number of abortions, is not going to bring God's grace and blessing on this country. So I think there are certain Christians out there who have this Pharisaical view that, like, the Holy Spirit roams over the surface of the earth, just looking for countries that have perfectly composed laws and doesn't care about what that country's actually doing. Like, okay, do you support Israel? Do you support pro-life policies, and that's it. And then it doesn't matter what's actually happening on the ground, but God does care about what's happening. And we're going to be judged for what we do, not for what we look like. And so the symbolic idea of, well, we just need to have the righteous laws to get God's blessing, honestly, I think it's more about alleviating the guilty conscience of American Christians than it is about actually saving babies or helping women, right? Because we don't want our identity associated with a country that endorses the evil of slavery or of abortion. So I would like righteous laws as well, but I want righteous laws that are a reflection of a righteous people, not just a symbol that we put up before God saying, don't judge us because we have the right law in the book. So you have the solution-oriented voter, you have the symbolic voter, pro-life voter, and then the third one are those who vote pro-life as a shield to distract, to give a moral justification to distract from the issues they actually care about.
Explain that more.
Well, back in 2018, Lifeway, which is the Southern Baptist research arm, did a really interesting study of evangelical voters and determined what were the most important issues that determined how evangelicals cast their ballots. And the shocking thing about that study, again, this is the Southern Baptist's own study. Right. This isn't Gallup, this isn't Pew, this isn't one of those secular organizations. This is the Southern Baptist. They found that among evangelical voters, abortion ranked 8th in importance in determining their vote.
Wow.
It wasn't number 1 or 2 or 5. It was 8th. The number 1 issue, at least in 2016, was taxes in the economy.
That's what I'm talking about, baby.
And the number 2 issue was immigration. So for some people, I'm not saying all, but for some people, when they are asked, why do you vote the way you vote, they will say abortion or because I'm pro-life. But it's a shield to cover up what they're really motivated by, which is money or immigration. And I'm not saying money and immigration are illegitimate issues to vote on, but they don't have as much of a biblical justification or a moral platform for those concerns as they do for abortion. So they use a abortion as a shield to say, no, I'm righteous, I'm moral, that's what's driving my vote, when in reality, it's more about economics or immigration. So that's the third category. And when you're dealing with somebody who says they're pro-life and they're going to vote a certain way, what I'm trying to diagnose is, okay, which one of these three do they fall under? Is it just a shield? Is it a symbol for them? Or are they actually looking for a solution that's going to help as many people as possible? And I think that that solution category is the one that I'm trying to talk through in a more nuanced way.
Yeah, no, those are very helpful distinctions. I wonder, I immediately thought of a category, and I wouldn't know where to put it under the others. Almost a simple, like, pro-life only means pro-baby. And it doesn't mean pro-woman, and it doesn't mean pro-immigrant, and it doesn't mean, you know what I mean? Like, it seems like there's a simplified version of the pro-life movement that cares very little about life once it's here.
Yeah. And, I don't want to disparage people who hold that point of view, because I think I kind of understand it.
Okay.
I think they can make a case that, yeah, there are these other horrific things that are happening, the racism, injustices, things like that exist in our society. But in their framing of it, the taking of roughly 800,000 innocent unborn lives every year is a genocide. It's a Holocaust of a sort that is way beyond what horrors may exist at the southern border, or the fact that 500 children have been separated from their parents and they can't be found by the Justice Department. I mean, those are all horrific, but this one is so disproportionately large that they feel like it has to eclipse all the others. And to a degree, I understand that point of view. And if somebody holds that point of view and says, I will simply not vote for any candidate who is pro-choice, I think that's a morally justifiable and consistent argument to have. However, to simply say because a candidate is pro-life, they automatically get my vote is not the same, right? So, and I think this is David French's argument. He would say that a candidate has to be pro-life to earn his vote, but they can't only be pro-life. So a candidate who says they're pro-life but actually perpetuates these other injustices and dehumanizing horrors in our society is not worthy of our vote. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, that's huge. It's a necessary but not sufficient condition in my philosophical training. So for David, for others, it would have to be true, but it can't only be true.
That's right. And I think the person who says, yeah, Trump does all these terrible things, or his administration has done or perpetuated these injustices, but abortion, that's not good enough. That's not a morally sufficient excuse for the other atrocities. And to everyone's surprise, John Piper came out and just wrote a piece.
We were shocked.
Exactly that point, that the things that this president has said and done aren't outdone by the fact that he says he's pro-life.
Yes. No. And there were Vox updates scurrying. The Vox media team of this podcast were scurrying onto the interwebs to verify the article you tweeted out, to go, oh my goodness, this is kind of a big deal. And I guess that's what I meant by more the simplified view, that because of this, all other considerations are rendered secondary. Right. And I personally don't see that kind of permission given. But that's a different debate for a different day.
And again, if you really believe that, then my argument would be, then you should want to pursue the policies and the elected officials who will do the most to reduce that horror that you see happening in our country. And simply voting for a pro-life president is not the answer.
So that's the good becomes, or the best becomes the enemy of the good.
Exactly.
In that circumstance, right?
Right.
I can only hold out for the absolute abolition of Roe and all abortion, and to do anything else but that is to compromise.
Yes.
Yeah.
And that's a very principled way to think of things, but it's actually not what's going to help solve the problem.
Right.
And we have parallels. People, one of the more common rebuttals I've gotten about this whole video was, well, what you're saying would be horrific if you applied it to slavery.
That's right.
Right?
Yep.
And there's a lot of problems with equating abortion with slavery, which I wrote about in a response. But we got to remember, like, Abraham Lincoln was not opposed to slavery, or he wasn't advocating abolition when he was elected in 1860. So, he was a pragmatist on the issue. He didn't launch the Civil War with the intent of freeing the slaves either. So, and these issues are a little bit apples and oranges, which we can get into if you want, but you can't just simply take a pragmatic approach to reducing abortion and saying a pragmatic approach to reducing slavery is not morally justifiable.
Yeah, that's been something you've been hearing. Skye, and again, the reason this seems so important isn't whether or not you, listener, agree with the morality of abortion or not. It's that one of the primary reasons that only Trump and only Trump would be considered is simply that he's the pro-life candidate. And we're saying, well, yes, but the reality is much more complicated than that. Have there been any reactions from the Christian side of things that have surprised you? Anything you weren't expecting?
I don't know if anything's been surprising. I mean, there's been a lot of affirmation. There's plenty of people who've been very kind in affirming the video and saying thank you for putting research and language to ideas that I've thought about for a long time. One of the more surprising, I think Rich Stearns, who's the president of World Vision, affirmed it and retweeted it out and said something along the lines like, the video shows a lot of the story behind abortion that a lot of people aren't aware of, and it'll open your eyes. And I think some of what I found most interesting in researching the video and writing the script has been, what was the world like before 1973, before Roe v. Wade? Because I think a lot of people on all sides have the assumption that before 1973, abortion was super rare in America, and Christian values dominated the culture, and therefore it wasn't until 1973 that we saw this explosion of abortion. And it's actually just the opposite. Like, abortion was widely accepted in the 19th century. It was legal everywhere in the United States in 1776. In the 1930s, even at the height of anti-abortion laws, there were still about 800,000 abortions every year in this country, legal abortions, which is about the same number we have today. So the history, I think, is interesting because if you believe that abortion began in 1973 with Roe, it's easy to assume that overturning Roe is the solution to it.
Yeah.
But it's not. Even without Roe v. Wade, we would still have this much more complicated cultural and moral dilemma of how do we solve this problem. It's far more insidious and complicated than people think. And the simple answers offered by politicians on all sides is meant to drive political engagement and fundraising rather than that. So the history is worth looking into to understand that it's very different than slavery. Slavery could be outlawed with a constitutional amendment. Abortion cannot. It won't be ended. Making it illegal. I mean, I used the example of Michigan in the video. Michigan, prior to Roe, did have laws against abortion, and yet over a 2-year period, 30,000 women from Michigan traveled to New York for a legal abortion. 30,000. That doesn't count all the women who performed abortions illegally.
Yeah, or didn't report it.
Or didn't report it. Exactly. Yeah. So it isn't like just having the right law in the books solves this problem.
Right.
We need to have a more holistic vision of how we're going to deal with this. It's a little bit more akin to the drug problem, where simply making a drug illegal doesn't mean people aren't using it.
Right.
It requires a holistic approach. And the simplicity with which we address this issue in too many of our Christian communities, and certainly in our politics, is not helpful.
No, and I think now we're on to where we meet the heart of Christ, even in the midst of the policy discussions, right? That simply announcing you are pro-life and that abortion is murder doesn't do enough to care for the people who are considering, who feel like there's no other choice, who feel absolutely trapped in systems they did not create and cannot escape. It does nothing to address those deep heart, brutal issues that are easy to talk about as guys because they don't affect us the same way.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think you're onto something there. Because, I mean, preaching in the choir here, but Jesus' approach was so different from the religious shaming and condemnation of this day. And when you have people in the name of pro-life shaming and condemning, we even had somebody, hey, if it saved one life, isn't it worth turning off 100 people to Christ? And that was his argument, even if you save one life. And which I thought was, again, I appreciate that there's consistency sometimes in these directions, though I would heartily disagree with that kind of conclusion. So if people are listening, Skye, and are confused by all of this, just what are a couple of really practical takeaways? So on the one hand, let's say I am deeply pro-life, I am a committed Christian, and I want to see the number of abortions decrease. What would you say to me?
I would say, number one, as it comes to voting, I would investigate what are your local and state officials' views on healthcare policy, on adoption policy, and on abortion. Because what they view and what they want to enact on the local and state level has proven to have a deep impact on the number of abortions in an area. Sometimes that means limits on abortion, limiting late-term abortion, waiting periods before an abortion. It means easier access for adoption, lower costs for adoption, greater funding for crisis pregnancy centers. Those kinds of policies really make a difference. It's not that the law and politics doesn't matter. It does. It just happens to matter disproportionately more at the local and state level than at the federal. That's number one. Number two, if you're listening to this podcast, my hope is you're a part of a local church and that local church is engaged in the local community. Find out, what is your church doing to support women and families that find themselves in circumstances where abortion may be a viable option, and you want to help them think differently about it. Are you engaged at a local pregnancy center? And what are you doing? There's those local things, and they're different in every community. Hopefully your church has some connections to those, and then find out, what can you do to help? What check can you write? What time can you volunteer? What resources can you allocate there? Those kinds of things do way, way, way more than how you cast a vote for the presidency once every 4 years.
Yeah. No, that's really good stuff, Skye. Tim, do you have any thoughts, buddy?
No, I think you guys are cruising. I was the whole last section while you were talking. The only thing that kept going through my head was hearing Jesus say, you heard it said, fight for the unborn. But what I say to you is, be a little bit more intentional than the 4-year. That seems to be like the theme through the Sermon on the Mount, is like, it's not just making this proclamation and this big rule to follow. It's like, let's break it down and care for people and get involved with their lives.
Yeah, I would encourage people to just take a few minutes and consider the mental exercise of, what if tomorrow you wake up and abortion is illegal everywhere in the United States? What would you do? If that would fundamentally change the way you engage this issue, then something's wrong. Because making it illegal everywhere in the United States is probably not going to change the number of abortions. Right? It's still going to be a problem. And there are still going to be women who need help. There are still going to be families that need support. There's still going to be the conditions that give rise to the instinct to get an abortion. And we still have to address that. It's a lot like saying, if drugs are illegal everywhere in the country and you think therefore you don't have anything to worry about, or there's no moral concern that a Christian should have, that's obviously ridiculous. So I don't want to disparage those who are fighting and working in the legal realm and the political realm for good and just policies, but it's not the biggest piece of this puzzle. And we pretend as if it's not only the biggest piece, but the only piece sometimes. Right. And that's foolish.
Well, dude, this is really good stuff. I'm grateful for you and Phil and the Holy Post team tackling some of these really big issues. And, man, you've been such a great friend to us. So thank you. I just got my ballot today, so I'm going to rethink everything. Any other, you got any other stuff coming up, Skye, we'd want to keep an eye out for?
We are still making more videos. Phil, I don't know when this episode is going to go live for you guys for Vox, but Phil's working on a video right now shouldn't share this stuff, but it's essentially titled "How Should Christians Vote?" And that one it's really well done. I'm writing a script for a video. I don't know when this one will out. It's basically looking at immigration policy. And there's a number of people, it's kind of a derogatory term now, but being the son of an immigrant, I feel okay saying this. There's a lot of people talking about the brown of them, the fact that whites will be a minority by, was it 2045? So I'm looking at the 1965 immigration law that actually led to what's called chain migration or family reunification, which the Trump administration, and the irony being that it was white conservatives who pushed for that to be added to the immigration bill, which backfired spectacularly and led to the browning of America rather than keeping it white.
Oh, wow.
So we'll do a video about that. And then we'll probably move into some upcoming videos on the history of evangelicalism, the difference between evangelicalism and fundamentalism, the rise of mega churches. We got a bunch of great stuff in the queue.
All right. Sounds good, man. Well, listen, appreciate you guys. Thanks for all that you do. Skye Jethani, everybody. You can find him on Twitter and go to the Holy Post Facebook page, website. And that's all I got. Skye, any last words?
No, I love being with you guys. Thank you for always jumping right into the big issues rather than running away from them.
Well, I appreciate that about you, my friend. All right. Thank you so much. Our dear Vox friends, thank you for tuning in. Go ahead and check out the video we're talking about and let us know what you think. Thanks.
Thank you for listening to this conversation. The Vox Podcast is a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is supported by listeners like yourself. If you'd like to partner with us, you can do so at patreon.com/Vox Podcast. You can also engage with the hosts on social media at facebook.com/Vox Podcast, on Instagram at Vox Podcast, and on Twitter at Mike Erre. Thank you for walking this road with us.